The problem is that I can't control everything. In fact, I can control very little, and I spend an awful lot of time trying to control things that are beyond my control. And that is an exercise in futility, right? That is an exercise in exerting a great deal of energy. And sometimes when it works, meaning when things happen the way I want them to happen, I attribute that to, oh, I did it. I controlled the uncontrollable. When in reality, I exerted a lot of energy. Things happened the way they were going to happen no matter what. And it worked out for me. Welcome to Your Business is Not Your Boss. I am your host, Geoff Welch, and I help small business owners overcome overwhelm and replace overthinking with intentional action. What is up? Welcome to episode 32 of Your Business is Not Your Boss. I am your host and small business coach, Geoff Welch, and today we are going to be talking about some things you can do when things do not go to plan. I'm sure you've never experienced that at all, right? But when things don't work the way you expect them to, here are a couple of things, 3 things actually, you can do to adapt quickly to that change. But first, if you're feeling stuck, if you're feeling like there is work that you want to be able to do on your business, work you want to be able to do on setting your business up to be the kind of business that serves you, as opposed to, you just working for your business, you should grab my anti-overwhelm playbook now. You can get it at geoffwelch.com/playbook, and it's got a few ideas in there that will help you begin to reduce that overwhelm, begin to feel less stuck, and be able to really make tangible progress today. So I would encourage you to grab that right now, geoffwelch.com/playbook. All right. Man, so this episode comes out of, as these are very autobiographical, comes out of a circumstance in which, while not a business issue, my wife and I had this trip planned, and it didn't work out like we had hoped. Actually, there are a couple things all at once. One, my wife had been traveling back from Chicago, and her flights got all messed up, some delays, some mechanical stuff with planes, and she had a protracted travel thing, and that's not super uncommon in this day and age for there to be delays and that kind of stuff. We actually have been very, very fortunate for a long time to have very few issues coming from Alaska. Remember, very, very few issues traveling that way, but she was delayed and had to get planes rescheduled and overnight and unexpectedly in Seattle, and there was just a lot of moving parts there, right? So she had a plan for how arriving back at home or traveling back home was going to work, and that didn't happen the way she expected. Not because she didn't plan well, not because it wasn't a good arrangement, just things happen, right? The world continues to happen around you, even with the plans you have. And sometimes there's conflict there, right? The circumstances that present themselves do not line up with the plans that you had. The things about the world that you expected to be true change somewhat. So, for example, as I'm recording this, we were getting ready to go out for a camper trip for the weekend, and literally 2 or 3 days before, a forest fire starts right near where we were going to be, and they're evacuating people, and that's just not going to be a good solution anymore. It's also right around, I don't want to give too much away in terms of like when I'm recording this and when you're hearing it, but right around a little bit of a holiday, and so it's not like there's not going to be a great deal of competition for all the other sites. Other fallback destinations are likely to be full. Camping in Alaska is not really reservation based. It really is very often just show up. But to travel, an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, and then find out that there's no place for you to be is a little bit disappointing, right? So we are navigating. We did the best we could. We actually made reservations for this weekend specifically many months ago because we figured this weekend would be a hot ticket item. We wanted to go to a place that took reservations so we wouldn't have to guess, right? So we did our homework. We did the planning that we could do in order to set ourselves up for success in the best way possible. And, I'm not in charge of the forest fires. I don't get a say in those things. I don't get to plan those things out. They just happen, right? Storms, lightning, idiots with fireworks. There are many things that happen. And now there's a forest fire. And of course, thankfully right now, doesn't seem to be in, there are no structures, there are no, loss of life, nothing like that, because those are clearly more important than my camping trip. But we did the best we could to plan for a trip that was going to be really wonderful, and circumstances changed, and now that's not going to happen the same way. So we have a couple things that we can do, right? We can figure out how to move forward and how to do something different. That would be ideal. Or we can mope about it. And that's kind of what you want to do to begin with. And that's actually part of what I'm going to suggest as being a viable solution is I'll get there in just a second, right? So, but these kind of things in your business, in your personal life, in any number of arenas, these things are they are inevitable. You will plan well. You will do a great job of creating and crafting a plan that accounts for as many contingencies as possible, and yet something will slip through the cracks, either because it was really difficult to see or because it didn't exist when you made the plan, right? Something new happened and changed. So here are three ways to adapt quickly when your plans have to change or when the world changes around you and you have to adapt to that. Number one, and this is going to sound silly, it's going to sound probably a little dramatic, but I run into this over and over again, and I think it's fundamental to so much of what we do as professionals, as small business owners. Number one is to grieve. Okay, the 5 stages of grief. I always butcher these. I talk about them all the time, but it's denial, anger, and bargaining are in there. I can't remember which order they're in. Depression, and then finally acceptance. There is this process of saying, no, this can't be. There is this anger around, I'm mad that this is. There is bargaining around, how can I get myself out of this? Is there a way that I can get the thing that I want? And when we talk about grief, we think about someone who we love not being around anymore, and obviously the plans that we have and the changes that need to be made because circumstances change for our small business or whatever, it's not the same as that. But I think the principles are the same. When I talk to small business owners over and over and over again, they feel stuck because something has changed. There is something that is different or has changed in their business that they have not yet come to terms with. And where they're stuck is they're not ready to say, okay, that can't be anymore. That's not a possibility anymore. So I have to think of something different. They may still be bargaining, or they may still be angry, but they're not processing that anger. They're not saying, it really makes me angry that this is the case right now, and I need to figure out what to do with that. Because you can sit there with the anger for weeks and for months and not get anywhere. You don't feel any better. The circumstances you're in aren't changing. You're not getting any closer to the thing you want while you sit there, right? And so it is important to process those things. And man, there are moments when I just want to, I want to find a place where no one else is around and I want to yell. And this is a great environment, right? I can make a lot of noise out here. I just want to yell that I'm mad. I'm mad that this isn't working the way I want it to. I'm mad that I don't have the resource I need, or that the partner that I thought was going to make this all better, that our partnership was going to really create something great, that they aren't on board anymore, or that's not going to happen the way I want it to. That's fine. That's great. Be angry, but then say, I'm doing this to get it out because I need to process that. And sometimes for me, I think there's a lot of power. I spend a lot of time in my head, right? I spend a lot of time thinking about things. And so I would say I am more introspective than the average bear. I probably spend a lot more time thinking about thinking than most people do. But even then, I find saying it out loud so that I can hear it changes how I process it. And I don't know if that sounds too woo-woo or strange to you, but I do think that our brain, some people are like, what do they call it? Like some people work better or learn better by, watching a video. Some people want to have their hands on it. Some people need to hear it. We each have different styles for how we learn. And so I do think that we process information differently. When it's just rattling around in our head, I think it can mean one thing, and our brain does one thing with it. And when we hear it fed back, even if it's our own voice, I think it does something. I don't know how many times I've been on calls with clients where they will explain the problem, they'll explain what's going on to me, and I'll just pause for a few minutes and let them sit there. And they say, actually hearing it out loud, I'm sure you have heard someone say that. You may have said it yourself. Hearing it out loud, there's something powerful about expressing it to somebody else, about putting it into words so that someone else can understand it. And I think part of that is we now hear it back for ourselves, and our brain does something different to that information when it comes in through our ears. So processing that is fantastic. Be angry. It's fine to move through those stages, but like I would say, when something isn't working the way you want and you don't understand why you can't get past it, I think about those stages of grief. Like, where do you fit in there? Because while it is not grief like losing a loved one, there is a loss associated with that. And this idea really came to the forefront for me during COVID, where I thought a lot of people were dealing with a sort of low-level grief around losing the sense of normalcy they had, there were all these family events that were canceled, and all these different things that couldn't happen because of that, vacations and trips and all sorts of stuff. And I was like, man, there are a lot of people that are dealing with this sort of low-level sense of grief from having lost something, maybe not even that low level, but they're not thinking about it in those terms. And it's like, I don't think that we were all processing it very well, because we weren't recognizing that we were really experiencing a loss, like a sense of loss, right? So I say all of that to say, until you get to the point of acceptance where you accept, here is what is different about my world, here is the reality I find myself in, you are not going to be able to move forward in a real meaningful way. You're going to be bargaining. You're going to be holding on to something that isn't there anymore, that isn't true anymore. So to accept the fact that the world is different than you thought it was going to be, that circumstances are different, gives you the ability to say, I can pour my energy into what I do about this. Okay, so 1, grieve. Just consider where you fit on those 5 stages of grief, and figure out what you need to do to move to acceptance. 2, loosen your grip. And man, this is counterintuitive. I get it. I am a control enthusiast, and there is nothing more that I love than to feel like I've got all the ducks in a row, and that everything is accounted for, and that I have a plan and things are going the way I expect them. The problem is that I can't control everything. In fact, I can control very little, and I spend an awful lot of time trying to control things that are beyond my control. And that is an exercise in futility, right? That is an exercise in exerting a great deal of energy. And sometimes when it works, meaning when things happen the way I want them to happen, I attribute that to, I did it. I controlled the uncontrollable. When in reality, I exerted a lot of energy. Things happened the way they were going to happen no matter what. And it worked out for me, right? So I'm a drummer, right? So I got my drum set back here, and there are times when I get in my head about what I am doing as a drummer, and there are times when I'm trying to do something that may be just at the edge of my abilities. And what happens in those moments is I generally start to get increased tension in my body. You start to grip the sticks a little tighter. You start to become a little more stiff, a little more rigid. And I don't know anyone who was ever a better drummer because they got more rigid, like because their body was less elastic. The stick, if you've, I don't know how many of you have ever experienced this kind of thing, but if you drop the stick towards the drum, it wants to bounce up and down on its own. It's going to hit that drum and go up and go down and go up and go. It's a rebound. It's like a basketball. If you dropped a basketball, right, the basketball does not hit the ground and stay on the ground. It naturally rebounds, right? And so there's probably a similarity to dribbling a basketball, although I know so little about basketball that I couldn't tell you if it's the same. If you try to hold on to the stick too tightly, the stick can't rebound. It can't do what it naturally wants to do. And a rebound effectively is the stick comes back up so that you can push it back down again. So imagine the difference between if you had, so we'll go back to the basketball. I'm going to mix my metaphors like crazy here. If you had to throw that basketball down, pick it back up, throw it back down, pick it back up because it didn't bounce. Well, I mean, basketball would be a much slower game, right? Like you would have to spend a lot of time to get from one end of the court to the other because you're having to exert all of your energy to pick that ball back up. As opposed to if the only thing you do as a player is push that ball back down. Every time you push it down, it comes back to you. The stick is the same way. If every time you throw that stick down, it comes back to you, well, you have a lot less work to do than if you are trying to do stiff arms, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. There's only so fast you can go. And so the best, in terms of speed, the best drummers, the fastest drummers, are the ones who have figured out how to get out of the way and let the stick do as much of the work as possible. Now, they are controlling the stick. They are making the stick do a very specific thing at a specific time in a specific way, but they really are only controlling a part of that movement, and then they let the stick do what the stick does, which is to come back to them. That is a long way of saying sometimes we need to let go a little bit, and instead of trying to muscle the whole process and say, I feel a little out of control here, so I'm going to squeeze a little tighter. We say, I feel a little out of control here. I think I need to relax because the tension I'm experiencing is actually influencing what happens next. It actually might be making things worse for me. I had a friend recently tell me about an experience he had with a rip tide or a rip current. Effectively, he was being pulled away from the shore. And the initial response is to want to fight against it. The initial response is to go back the way you came and to work as hard as you can to get back to shore. And while I've never experienced this personally, I can only imagine that's a very panic-inducing kind of moment when you are working as hard as you can and actually losing ground, being pushed out into the ocean. I'll tell you, the ocean is big and it does not care about you. My wife and I love to spend time on the coasts. We love the ocean, and yet you don't have to spend a lot of time in the ocean before you realize this is very big and it does not care about me. It's going to do what it does whether I'm here or not. And you can use that, like surfers use that to their advantage, right? They use the power of the ocean to do some pretty remarkable things, but they also can get wrecked because of it, right? Because the ocean doesn't care that they're there. The ocean is very big. The thing to do in a rip current, apparently, is to try to swim parallel to the shore. The idea being that it is moving away from the shore, and if you can move parallel, you can escape the strength of it and find a way out of it. That is not the most natural and obvious thing for a lot of people, right? We want to lean into it, fight harder. And man, what if that's what you're experiencing when something goes wrong with your plans? Your plan didn't work, and so you are like, I am going to force it. I'm going to find a way to make this do what I want it to do. when you don't actually have control, when you don't actually have enough power and energy to do that, and when just stepping to the side a little bit, loosening your grip. We've got a few different metaphors cooking here, right? But I hope you get the idea. To be less of a rigid force in this situation, and to bend a little bit maybe, right? How do I not get in the way and allow for some things that I can't control to happen because I can't control them, and then figure out what I can control? A drummer, a basketball player, they control the downstroke. I mean, I've seen a little bit of basketball, and it surely does seem like a lot of basketball players scoop that ball up from underneath, which I believe is a double dribble or something like that. Traveling, I don't know. I'm pretty sure it's illegal, but every time I see basketball, I'm like, yeah, that seems like they're cheating. But I'm not a basketball referee. But you are controlling the downstroke, not the upstroke. Let the upstroke happen. Control the downstroke. You are loosening your grip. You are letting certain things happen so that you can control the part that is within your control. Okay, number 3, get weird. I think a lot of times when something does not go to plan, we immediately go into, we're going to brainstorm how to basically navigate a detour, right? How can we make the smallest pivot possible to get the specific outcome we already had in mind? And while there certainly are times when the outcome is so specifically important that that's the only thing that you can work on, is how do we move back to that outcome? Sometimes our brainstorming is so narrow. We are only thinking of the thing we were already thinking of when we started, and we don't zoom out enough to say, what if this new circumstance, this new twist, what if that was something that was actually affording me the ability to do something I couldn't do before? What if there's an opportunity in this little twist, this little plot twist, that allows me to go somewhere I couldn't go before, to have an outcome I couldn't have before, to actually maybe even have something better than what I was expecting? I know, like with this little camping trip fiasco, we'll call it a fiasco. That sounds like a fun word. The initial thing is what we wanted was this kind of experience, and now we can't have that, so it's ruined. What if we looked at it like, what if there was an alternative that was similar, but it could get us some of the core things, but actually allowed us to do something that we weren't even thinking of before, because we had a narrow view of what was possible. And now that the possibilities have changed, what does that mean for us? In fact, so far, we have a line on something where we actually might be able to get closer to a lake than we had previously thought, because our planning had led us into a very specific direction. And now we're opening ourselves up to a bunch of new options, right? But I'm even willing to go as far as like, what if it's not camping? What if it's not this, that, or the other? What if we looked at, we've got 3 or 4 days to ourselves. What is possible? What could we do? I told my wife, I was like, let's just fly to Seattle. And she looked at me like I was crazy, and it probably is crazy. But sometimes the ability to say, what if we did this crazy thing, gets you a step closer to something. It's like, well, what about this? Yeah, that may be too far out, but what about this thing? I hadn't thought about that before. And I think that getting weird, being able to take a few minutes and say, what does this new twist open up for us? What does it create for us instead of what is it taking from us? What is it maybe opening the doors for as opposed to just the door that looks closed, right? Sometimes we focus so much on the one door, we don't understand that around us are all sorts of alternatives. We're looking at one thing. And I kind of look at that as like a flashlight in the dark. A flashlight in the dark illuminates a specific part of an environment. And we get focused maybe on what's illuminated there, and so focused that we don't understand what's behind us or what's to our left or to our right. We aren't really taking it all in because all we can see is what this beam of light illuminates. So get weird. Use the circumstance to your advantage. Look at ways that this may actually help your business, that this may actually create a new opportunity for you to do something that wasn't even possible before. All right? Your plans are going to get messed up at some point. Hopefully not a lot. Hopefully not significantly. But it is inevitable that at some point you're going to have created just a chef's kiss plan. And the world is going to change. And you're going to have to adapt to it. So these are 3 ways to do that maybe a little bit more quickly, or at least to do it more fully. So 1, grieve. Work through the process of saying, I'm mad, I'm frustrated, I don't like that I have lost this thing, so that you can move on, so that you can put your energy into, okay, but it's gone. What next? 2, loosen your grip. The work you are doing to try to control a bunch of things you can't control is just taking energy away from controlling the things you can. It is possible that the control you are trying to exert is actually making it worse, not better. So think about how loosening your grip, letting go a little bit, might actually serve you in this situation. And 3, get weird. Open yourself up to new possibilities and opportunities that might be created by this twist, instead of just focusing on what has been taken from you and what you have lost. It is possible something even better is around the corner because of this circumstance that you would never have invited. All right, that's it from me. Before I go, make sure, if you're feeling stuck, if you are feeling like some unexpected twist has taken you off course, grab a copy of my anti-overwhelm playbook at jeffwelch.com/playbook. It's going to help you reassess and turn the volume down on some of the chaos starting today, okay? I think it could really help you. All right, before I go, don't forget, the circumstances you find yourself in are incredibly fluid and dynamic. Being a small business owner is all about adaptation. This is the game. Get used to it, okay? And don't forget, your business is not your boss.